Daily is daily Vikings entertainment. We just want the Vikings to win a Super Bowl before we die.
I will ride with this group.
Seriously, man. Please.
And away we go.
That's right, Kevin O'Connell. Away we go. Is this a treat? Purple Access. Okay, so it's Scoggins, because you know Scoggins from the Star Tribune. But before Scoggins, who did I work with at the Star Tribune? Kevin Seifert, ESPN, covers the team again now. This is big stuff. I think this is the first time the three of us have been on screen in forever, right?
On screen, but in constant communication, of course.
Well, yeah, we don't like to talk about that because there's a lot of text messages. Our wives get upset. Why do you pay more attention to what Kevin's texting you than me? Yeah. I'm like, well, because there's Vikings news out there.
Don't show our text chain. Don't show our text chain.
The John Clayton rule, the old John Clayton rule should apply, which is after 10 o'clock, that's the wives' time.
Oh, was that the rule?
Yeah,
I violated that rule.
Yeah, he gave that advice to Sando on his wedding day. Mike Sando, who now works at The Athletic, got that advice on his wedding day that you can work up until 10 o'clock, but after 10 o'clock, you got to pay attention to your wife.
So gracious, 10 p.m.
Yeah,
but 10. You can text, right?
But for Clayton, that was Pacific time, 10 Pacific. I mean, that's,
That's 1 a.m. on the East Coast, right?
Yeah, your news is pretty much wound down by that point.
GMs aren't like, okay, I got to get back to John Clayton. It's 2 a.m. here in New York.
Yeah, no, they're sleeping.
All right, boys. This is going to be a Vikings roundtable discussion. So, and just for the context of the discussion, Chip, columnist, Star Tribune. Seifert, though, boots on the ground at TCO all the time. So he brings more insight than the two of us have, certainly. And let's rip the Band-Aid right off and talk about what everyone is talking about. That's the quarterback position. So start with you, Kevin. Where do you think, because like we all have opinions, but where do you think the Vikings are and where do you think things are going when it comes to Darnold, McCarthy, and the future as a whole?
I think that their decision-making process is going to start and is starting with evaluating exactly where J.J. McCarthy is. I mean, and that seems like the most important thing. If you're trying to decide whether you need Sam Darnold or want Sam Darnold or you want Daniel Jones or you want another veteran, first you should know exactly as much information as you think you're going to be able to get about J.J. McCarthy before those next steps come. And so J.J. McCarthy is just getting back on the practice field and doing his on-field training. And we've all seen him. People have seen him on TV. He lost a lot of weight during his recovery, and which is not unusual for players who have a season-ending injury. You work on the exercises that get your, in this case, your knees stronger, and not so much just your overall strength workouts. And so he'll have to work on getting that back, which I'm sure he will. And so they're going to have to decide that. I think if they get to a point by March where they're feeling pretty good about his progress, then I think that there'll be a small window for them to bring back Sam Darnold, just based on finances and just based on really just the awkwardness of asking him to come back when you did a great job last year. We want you to come back, but you might not play, and so right. And I wouldn't blame Sam Darnold if he thought there might be better offers than that.
Chipper, your thoughts?
Yeah, the timing is so weird because you're right. I mean, you see McCarthy, he's lost a lot of weight. Like, he's got a lot of physical stuff. I mean, it's interesting that Kwesi let that known that he passed him in the hall. He was out there on the field working out on his way to his end of the year press conference. I don't think that was a slip of the tongue. I think he was letting him know that, he's on the field and they're, kind of seeing him ramp up there. But me personally, I just think Darnold's going to be too expensive for all the holes that you have to fix on this roster. I don't have a real good sense. It's tricky because what is his value now based on those last two games versus the first 16? I have no idea. I mean, our team's going to be able to look past those two games and say, you know what? For whatever reason they happen, or are they going to look at it and say, no way, not, we can't commit whatever the number was, 30 million, 40 million. And so, but you're gonna have to make a decision on if you think you're gonna have to make a decision on McCarthy. Probably after you're gonna know about McCarthy after you have to make a decision on quarterback, right? I mean, it's gonna be July probably before you know. Okay, is he physically ready? Is he caught up to speed with all the time that he's missed on the field? Is he ready to be the starter on day one? Well, you're going to have to know your plan B before you know that question, right? So I think I would try to sign Daniel Jones to a 1-year, $15 million deal. And because I just would not give $40 million, I wouldn't franchise Darnold. I would be nervous that you wouldn't be able to trade him. And then you would be in a situation with what Atlanta went through with Cousins this year. Like, let's say he gets off to a bad start. If you did that and he gets a bad start and you want to play JJ, you're really going to have a $40 million backup on the bench? I don't think you want to do that. When you need the entire interior line replaced, you got to fix your secondary. You need help along your defensive line. So I think I would roll with the plan of hoping and believing that JJ will be ready, sign Daniel Jones to the emergency bridge thing, and spend that money elsewhere.
On the franchise thing, Kevin, so if they franchise him, it's clearly with the intention that they think that they have a deal to trade him. Here's my question. If that's the case, does a team trade for him on the franchise tag and then sign him to an extension? Because my guess would be is if you tag him and let's just say it's for sure a 1-year deal, approximately $40 million, right? It feels like Darnold and his camp would then work off of that as the extension. So I guess the question is, what do we think, to what Chip said, his price point is now? Like, is Darnold's price point 30, 40? Because it feels to me like if it's 30, franchising him is probably going to backfire, and if nothing else, a waste of your time.
Yeah, but part of it is like looking at taking a step back and saying, okay, there's going to be, and this is true for most years, but there's going to be more teams that are looking for quarterbacks than there are, really good quarterbacks available. And so you also have to judge the market on a relative scale. There's a few, in the draft. And then like, there's still like, who are the free agent quarterbacks besides Sam Darnold? You're talking about Justin Fields, maybe Russell Wilson, obviously Daniel Jones. Like, if a team needs somebody, who's the first person off the list? And Sam Darnold might still be that person. You're right in that if they franchise tag him and then a team wants to sign him to like a 3-year, even $100 million contract that averages less, a lot less than the franchise tag and maybe doesn't even get him to 40 million guaranteed total, then that could be a problem. But if it's a place he wants to go, and I think, one thing that Sam Darnold learned this year and we all learned in watching is how much of a difference it makes, environment makes. And so, I do think part of Sam's performance overall this year was that he was ready to be better and had gone through the things he needed to do that. But obviously, like, the coaching staff and the people around him were a big plus as well. And so I think he knows that, and I think like that'll drive some of his decision making as well.
How much do you think that drives other teams looking at him too? Is like, hey, he had the perfect setup there with O'Connell, with Jefferson, with Addison, with all the things were built around him, the infrastructure for him to succeed. They may look at it and say, we don't have that.
They might also, like, it depends. Like, let's say Matthew Stafford retires in Los Angeles. Would Sean McVay, it could be the O'Connell character in that story, and you've got Nakua and Cooper Kupp, and I'm not saying I don't have any information that Stafford's retiring, but it would need to be something like that, I would say.
Yeah, because that's all. I mean, Darnold knows more than anyone. Circumstances matter. He saw his first 2 stops. Like, you have to. So I wonder. It's fascinating from his point of view too, because you only get so many bites of the apple as a player, right? And so if the deal's there, but if the market's not as great as what we think it might be, or could they get him here back on a 1-year, $20 million deal? 1 year, 20.
Yeah. And like, I've thought a lot about that, and I just wonder what's the pitch to him in that sense. Like, like we just said, like, they have, assuming that they're going to be honest and like if Sam's smart, he knows the situation. He knows they drafted McCarthy. They've already gone 1 year without getting him on the field, and like it's going to happen. And so like the best pitch you can make is come back and be ready to play in case JJ's not. Same way it was last year. Like they can't guarantee him a single start. And so, and he knows that if it's anywhere close, that they'll probably want to get JJ on the field. Like he would have to be, significantly ahead. And so if that might end up, we don't know, like that might end up still being his best offer and might still end up being the best situation for him for 1 year. And so maybe that happens, but that feels awkward. And like, people like Judd would be writing and talking every week.
Substack would be going nuts
about how much internal strife it must be causing in the locker room.
But to your original point, like there's going to be enough teams that need quarterbacks that's probably the last ditch.
Yeah,
that's probably the last alternative, right?
Yeah, and that's not a terrible one, but
not a terrible one. But
it's and if that becomes the best one, then maybe he'll have to pull Judd aside at the start of training camp and say, look, I'm fine with this. I know you're going to.
He'll cut open a vein to me.
I know you're gonna assume that I'm mad and bitter and that I got treated wrongly and terribly, but I really feel good about it. Please don't write nasty things.
This is a tough one though, because I agree. Like if he goes to the wrong place, it could be a disaster. Like if he's like, you know what, the Giants, I'm going to go to the Giants. They want me, which I don't think is the case. But like the Raiders, right? Like we don't know who's going to be the coach there. We don't know. Like I'm not convinced this Brady is guiding things is going to work. The guy's trying to work 2 jobs, great player, but that doesn't, necessarily make him the steward of a great as an executive. So, but the flip side is, as Kevin said, if you're Darnold and someone comes along and says 3 years, take your pick, and that's like generational. Like that's your one chance. Are you going to come back here on like a 1 year? I'll come back, for $20 million. So he's in a real pickle.
And that's even like with the franchise tag that would be sort of like, I mean, it's a business and everybody needs to do what's best for themselves, but that would be the harshest message almost. Like we're going to franchise tag you. We're not going to let you go out on the market and find out what your value is. And you still might not even play much next year if our young kid is ready to roll like we hope he is. And then like that, I mean, and he'd say, fine, I'll take your $40 million and be a backup, which, isn't a good situation for the Vikings. So that's why, like, when you talk through it and you think like, and again, maybe I'm being naive or thinking that they'd be too much in the corner of not wanting to do something awkward or do something that's not in the player's best interest. But
right.
I guess it's hard to really think through a scenario where it's in the Vikings' best interest and Sam Darnold's best interest to do, a significant financial contract or even the franchise tag for him, unless we get going back to the original point, like unless they think JJ is going to need another year for whatever reason.
Yeah, that's a tough one too. And part of that is O'Connell could have rightfully so perhaps convinced himself that if Daniel Jones comes back on as Chip said, a 1 year, let's say $12 to $15 million contract, he might just say, I can develop him. So like this is all a very convoluted situation.
And you look at it from the Wilf situation, and we don't know exactly how they feel about it, but generic NFL owner who just paid his head coach a brand new contract extension in no small part because of his skills in developing quarterbacks. So I now need to pay the head coach, whatever he got, one of the top salaries from head coaches in the NFL because he's a great quarterback coach. And then I have to pay a quarterback a lot of money too. And I can't just trust my quarterback guru to develop the next guy. Come on.
Well, and I go back to the entire plan last offseason was move on from Cousins and a big salary that prohibited you from spending that money elsewhere on your roster, get the rookie quarterback. Yes, and then you had a bridge. But the whole plan was to get JJ there as fast as you can. Now, other than the weight loss and he had the second procedure, everything they tell us is that, okay, he's moving, along the way that they think he should be on. Why would you deviate, from that plan when you just look at the roster? I mean, they have some massive holes that they have to fix. And so do you really want to spend $40 million on a quarterback at this point for 1 year? To me, it totally goes against the plan that they set in place last year and got the wheels moving on. So,
yeah. And two, like to what Seifert was saying, you have this coach in place to develop QBs. He finally identified one in the draft. Are you really going to retain a guy on a significant salary, perhaps, who, by the way, had 2 terrible games to end the season? So here's my question. So the Vikings are picked to win 6.5 games. They win 14 games. It's a phenomenal year. But the last 2 games, Detroit and the Rams, leave a definite bitter taste of sorts. Start with you, Kevin. Where do we land, or where do you land on where this team is at, given a season that was fantastic, but definitely showed some flaws in 2 very key games at the end?
I think they were playing with house money this year. Like I thought, like this past year, I don't know about 6 games, that was the over under of that they were going to win 6.5, and the various analytics were predicting them for 6 or 7 wins, and they end up more than doubling that. And so I think where they're at 3 years into the O'Connell, Adolfo-Mensah era is they've got some very important pieces that will be, in theory, be in place for a long time. And they've got a coach and a coaching staff that has demonstrated an ability to overachieve based on at least external assessments of their roster and their ability to compete. You can't say that 2022 season was a fluke after watching what happened this year. And on top of that list, they have the ability to elevate quarterbacks. Whatever a quarterback's baseline is, like they've been getting more than that for the most part from all of them over this past 3 years. But in terms of where the arrow was pointing, I think that's like a more difficult question to answer. You would like to think that they're ascending in year 4 into a Super Bowl contender, and I'm not sure that I would put them in that boat for next year. The Lions were in year 4 this past year, and I think they rightly entered the year with expectations along those lines and probably would have gotten there had it not been for a ton of injuries. But the draft issues that they've had and the number of free agents they needed to sign and did a great job with in signing them to paper over that will leave them in a very difficult, unsustainable team building model. So I think they need to. So it's hard for me to say that like they're just kind of been ascending step by step, and that in year 4 they're a Super Bowl contender. But I do think that they have demonstrated that they have some really important and good pieces that will keep them competitive, at least as they, for their sakes, hopefully figure out a more consistent way to draft and bring young, cheap players into the building.
Chip, what are your thoughts?
Yeah. We tend to think of things as linear, like you're going to keep going, but it's never really that way, right? I mean, it's some seasons you overachieve, maybe like this one did. Kevin's right. Well, two things. For this to go anywhere, they have to hit on JJ McCarthy. He has to be what they thought, right? You have to. When you look at the playoff teams, better have a quarterback, man. Better have at that level, and you can't have a quarterback that airmails passes, or won't throw the ball. You got to have a quarterback. But the draft, the poor drafts the last 3 years, you don't replenish your talent supply, and Kevin said sustainable. That's right. You're not going to hit. I mean, they were basically 100% hit on their free agents this year, right? I mean, that's an anomaly. is great that happened, and kudos to them, but you're not going to go 100% on free or draft it, year after year. Now they got money to play with this year, what, $70 million, that they're going to have to make some splashes in free agency. Obviously, probably a guard or a center or a defensive tackle that they're going to have to use that money on. But that's the conundrum, because they don't have a lot of draft picks now. So you better hit on some undrafted guys too, like they have with Pace and Redmond. But to me, if you're looking at like from the 30,000 foot view, you can still manage the roster, but you got to hit on a quarterback. I mean, they have to be right about JJ.
Free agency. My positions are guard, because I don't like to draft guards high, but there's a slew of them out there that can be signed in March.
There's a guy who was pretty good here named Steve Hutchinson, sir.
But that's what I'm saying is, and you signed him to a 7-year.
Look what you had. If they had drafted him, they wouldn't have had to pay all that money.
Well,
yeah.
My point is, I would be willing to spend big.
You're right.
Yes.
That's very much an exception.
Yes.
Though.
So guard, defensive tackle, where the market is not that great, and cornerback. Do you guys agree? And would you put them in the same ranking, or do you think there's a position that should be one that I have 3 or 2?
I would say guard, offense guard 1, corner 2, interior defense lineman 3. If I was ranking them in priorities.
Yeah, and I wouldn't argue with that, but I'd also throw out running back. I mean, I don't know they have 3 draft picks right now. They'll get a 4th in terms of compensatory picks, but Aaron Jones is a free agent, and Cam Akers is a free agent, I'm pretty sure. And so, but either way, like they strung everything they could out of Aaron Jones this year. He had a career high in carries and yardage, and I think first or second in his career in terms of all-purpose yards. And so he had a great year overall, but to go into next year thinking at age 30 into age 31 that he's going to be able to do the same thing would probably not be great planning. And so we talk about interior blocking and all that, but they also need that position. They're going to have to address that position as well.
Yeah, I think that's for sure. I mean, I think this draft is pretty heavy with running back, so I would definitely draft somebody. I mean, I don't know what Aaron Jones' salary is going to command, but I think I would move on and try to get younger and cheaper and healthier there. It felt like he was sort of dragging to the finish line this year as much. I don't think I'd double down there. Love him.
No.
You're great, great professional and what he brought in terms of that, but I think it's too big a risk to try to bring him back.
And maybe there's a way to bring him back in a less strenuous role, but one way or the other, they need a workhorse.
Yeah. I think it's safe to say that Ty Chandler probably gone at this point.
I think he has one more year left on his contract, probably 4 years, but or at least be restricted, I guess. But they certainly don't seem to trust him as a runner after 3 years.
Yeah, it didn't work out, and that's the thing. Chip's right. It's a deep draft on that position, but the question is, can you find one? And my other question is, are they going to trade? Are they going to stay at 24 in the first round or trade back? Because I mean, the one way to acquire more draft capital immediately is to trade back. It feels to me like this might be a year where they dip back from 24 to either early second round or late first round and try and get at least a day 2 pick.
You go ahead, Chip.
No, you go.
Well, it probably depends on their assessment of how many impact players are in this draft, because they could use more impact players, regardless of position. And so, they got one at Jordan Addison was at number 23. He's the best player they've drafted in the past 3 years. So I'd like the argument for volume, and there's definitely an argument for moving into the second round and maybe picking up a 3rd round pick along with it or something like that. Or even to start building up future years if you don't like what, the top 2 or 3 rounds are for this year. But I also, there's the potential to get somebody who can impact you now and in the future. I wouldn't pass it up just for the idea. That's what they did in 2022. And didn't work out for them in part because when you start getting down there, there's definitely, plenty of players in the history of the NFL who became great players that weren't drafted in the first round, but your chances of hitting on those decreases with every round you go down. So the first assessment you have to make, like, to me, if you just walk into it saying we have to trade down because we need more bodies, and it should start with like how many, like can we get a really good impact player at 24, and if not, and if so, then you might end up staying.
We've seen that philosophy before, right?
Yeah.
The more hit, the more chances hit. Yeah, that drives me crazy when it's like draft is 15 guys and hope the number hits. No, just draft the best guys. And I understand this year's different because you have so few guys.
Yeah.
And if you could trade back and say you're getting a third, you should be able to find a quality player. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
You should. How much with their salary cap allotment? What do you think that is? That 3? I mean, are you making a huge splash on a guard? Or are you going to try to spread it out and get 3 guys for it? I mean, how many? What's realistic with that? So we were saying 70 million, right? Around there, give or take. We don't know who's coming.
I mean, it depends if there's somebody out there who's worth that. Like that, everybody's talking about Trey Smith from the Chiefs, but like, why would the Chiefs let him go? There's always, this is the time of year where everybody's salivating over free agency and all the guys whose contracts are expiring. And then as it approaches, you get guys re-signing, and then you get more people re-signing, and then you get franchise tags, and all of a sudden, like, because that's the other part. Like we were talking about free agency earlier. The other part is you're at the mercy of the other teams. I mean, sometimes teams want to sign somebody and they can't because the guy wants to get on the market, and they don't want to franchise tag him for whatever reason. But like, there's so many obstacles to getting good players into the market that, like, even if you're great at identifying the players that you could optimize and maximize in your scheme, like that, you're just hoping that they get away from their current teams.
And that's the thing. I think that's the thing that Kwesi and his staff did a really good job of last year, is finding those Blake Cashmans who aren't set in the market somewhere, but looked at him and said, you know what, this guy's going to be a really good fit in our scheme for whatever reason, a better fit in our scheme than somewhere else, and finding those great values. Now, you may have to overspend on a guard. I don't know, but because that's such a liability for you right now. But they did do a good job, I think, of identifying kind of, is value picks the right word for it? I don't know. I mean, Grenard did he have a lot of huge offers? I mean, I think he was in that camp too, where they found guys that fit their scheme that probably overperformed their contract in some regards.
Yeah. Or overperformed the expectations that a lot of other teams probably had for them.
Sure.
Do we think, ideal world, opening day next year, do we think Bradbury at center, like Brandel at a guard, new guy at right guard? Like, because I've seen stuff about they got to change everything. I don't think you're going to change 3 interior positions. I think you for sure are going to change 1 and maybe 2. But Kevin, do you think that we're talking about 2 of the 3, 1 of the 3? What's your best guess about what they actually end up doing at the end of the day to address this?
Yeah, I lean towards 2 of the 3, and I'm not sure which ones, but Brandel had a rough year. Like, he was, don't forget, he was a tackle, and a decent swing tackle. Like, he played left tackle and right tackle for them, and then they just decided to go put him at guard. And our friend Matthew Collar had a really good assessment of him in his story today, breaking down the offensive line, that, he did start off the season well, but like, by the end of the year, and maybe this had to do with Christian Darrisaw being gone too, like there was just a lot of subpar play going on there. And so I don't know that, it'll all depend on how many, who they can get in. It sure would have been nice if Ed Ingram had developed into a guy they could count on, but they gave it every, chance and a lot more, and it just didn't happen. And so, and O'Connell did the other part of the O'Connell quote about needing to upgrade or to improve the interior of the line. He said there's lots of ways to do that, and that includes players getting better. And so, that doesn't necessarily mean swapping everybody out. And so if you say, like, who do they have that could get better? And potentially Brandel, they could, but there certainly it wasn't as if he was ascending over the course of the season. If anything, he went in the other direction.
Yeah, Kwesi said that same thing when he was asked about O'Connell's quote after the game. He said, one thing is maybe these guys, I mean, do you really think you're going to have a dramatic improvement from Garrett Bradbury this point in his career, or Lando? Judd, I think they need 2. If they can do 3, I think.
Center as well.
Yeah, I just
Bradbury now is not changing. Like he's actually improved.
I don't think they're all veterans
from his first year. He ain't changing. Reisner's not back. Brandel is the wild card because the PFF grades clearly show Darisaw got hurt. Brandel went off the cliff. So like, is that because Christian was so good and helped him? But I mean, if I'm looking to address cornerback, possibly interior D line, interior O line, I don't know how much I could potentially spread around there and also address all three spots. 2 or 3, I think, is possible. 3 or 3, I think, is a pipe dream.
And this goes way inside football, but the other thing is, do they have anybody that was sort of in a redshirt year this past year that they could consider? And one possibility is Walter Rouse, who I think was a 6th-round pick last year. He played at Oklahoma and either Oklahoma and Stanford, and he was a left tackle. But I think there's some people in the building that think he could be a guard, and so he's a huge guy. Like he's has a locker right next to Christian Darisaw, and he's a lot bigger than Darisaw. And so like not totally out of the question. Like I wouldn't like use indelible ink to say Walter Rouse is starting guard next year, but at least a possibility. Thank you, Rouse. Rouse was Oklahoma. I don't know.
Yeah.
I get Oklahoma and Nebraska mixed up as being an East Coast.
That's not.
That's well. I also know he did go to Stanford too. So.
Yeah,
smart.
Yeah, and he is a big kid. But I mean, you're right. It's like when you look at what they need, they're conceivably they can't do everything in one offseason. Like
no,
they just don't have enough draft picks. Particularly when you look at their secondary, it's like, what is that going to look like? You know, I mean, with guys retiring, guys.
Yeah, you're looking at the top 5 people. You're talking about Harrison Smith, Cam Bynum. All these guys have like expiring contracts. Harrison Smith, Cam Bynum, the three cornerbacks, Murphy, Griffin, and Gilmore. And so that's all the 1-year contracts, and at least mixing in with some guys who have expiring contracts. And so like that's massive.
The thing Mekhi Blackman, you hope he comes back and is healthy, because I think they had high hopes for him. Obviously, the tragedy with Kyrie Jackson.
Yeah.
Is out of your hands.
It wasn't like they weren't trying to plan for this, but the plans haven't, worked out.
But, Murphy's an interesting one because, he's he's a Pro Bowl guy, and you think you want to re-sign him, but what's his market going to be?
Yeah, he's going to be, he's still pretty young. He came in the league very young. I think he's like 26 even now. And so 6 interceptions in a contract year.
You got to re-sign him, right? I think
he's going to get paid. He's going to get paid by someone.
Yeah. Maybe that's where your franchise tag is. I don't know.
Bynum makes the most sense to let walk, and he's good.
Yeah.
But I guess what I'd like to know, and the team I would think ASAP, is Harrison Smith coming back, because he's old, but he plays a position at which you can play until you're up in years. And the thing is, it feels like the common thread of the secondary is intelligence. Like those guys are football savvy. Yeah. They are incredibly smart. And the one thing I don't want to do is, if I'm the Vikings and Flores in particular, who it looks like is going to come back because he's not going to get a job, is I don't want to move Metellus off of what he does. Like he's so good in that, jack of all trades role, that the last thing that I want is for him to be a safety, because then I think that compromises a little bit or a big part of what makes your defense special.
Yeah, I mean, with Harrison, I mean, he was emotional at the end of last season too. So it was him being emotional this season. I don't know, it's a dead giveaway. He may go home back to Tennessee and say, you know what, my body actually feels pretty good for how I am. I don't know, but I'm, flip of the coin. I don't know. Bynum, I would be cautious about spending too much to re-sign him. I just think you have other priorities where that money needs to go. Let's say Mekhi Blackman comes back. You still need, 2 corners?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. 2. With the nickel.
Because Gilmore will retire probably, right? Shaq Griffin's not going to be back, I don't think. No. So, you almost have to re-sign Murphy, right? I know the price tag is going to be big, but you're going to have to re-sign him and then hope Blackman's okay and healthy and ready to go.
And the other thing about Harrison Smith, and we can debate, like, I mean, it's obviously not as impactful on a play-to-play basis as he was at the height of his career. But what Brian Flores has said repeatedly is like how much his presence allows him to do all these like high-level shifts and changes and disguises. Like basically, Harrison's out there not just like relaying calls, but making calls on his own that are on a level beyond what most defenses just do. Like normally, you know, to whatever extent your average NFL defense allows players on the field to change coverages or to kind of direct traffic, like Harrison's like many multiples above that. And so, and I know Harrison's enjoyed that part, but like Flores has really relied on that. And if you don't have a player who has that very narrow kind of skill set that Harrison has brought to this, then like that's going to change the way that, I mean, it doesn't mean they won't be as good or they can't overcome it, but they're gonna have to change a lot of the way they organize pre-snap because that was Harrison. And again, it's not just him relaying what Flores wants, but it's him kind of intuiting what Flores would want and calling it in real time.
Yeah, and when you talk to Harrison, he loves playing for Flores. He loves playing his defense. He loves everything about it. And I don't like watching him. You didn't say, man, he looks old this year. I mean, nothing like that. I think it's more like for him, it's like, do I want to go through the grind of getting ready and the day-to-day stuff? And I mean, that's just, you know, the more you do it, I mean, that would be 14 years, right? Because he played 13, is that right?
Yeah.
It's just the work that goes into being prepared and having your body ready and then get beat the heck and back.
Yeah.
Does he want to go through that? I don't think it was a performance thing at all. Like, no. Some guys just say, you know what, I don't have it anymore. I lost a step. I don't think that would into it. It's more like, do I really want to go through everything you have to do to be play at a high level?
Well, heck, they said in camp, his snaps are going to be cut down this season, right? His snaps are coming down. We're not going to play him as much. And Flores is like hell, we're not. Now, the good thing
for that reason that I just said, that's they couldn't run their defense without him, basically.
Exactly. Well, and that's the thing is like he's incredibly intelligent. I think Metellus is incredibly intelligent. Like all the stuff that guy does.
Yeah.
So like it's not just athletic ability. It's combined with like, can you pass this test? And if you change those positions out, it's not like the next guy can just step in and play there.
Yeah.
Last thing, Kevin O'Connell. So Seifert and I were both in agreement that there was something here. Now the contract's done. He signed. Mm-hmm. It's done. I get it, folks. Yes. But there was this jump to conclusion that, Jay Glazer, the morning of week 18, made up this report that there were teams that were, by the way, it was considering calling. He didn't make that up. It was true. Yeah. Now, that doesn't mean he was ever going to be traded. But, Kevin, what was your feeling about the fact that, I mean, I understand the Wilfs didn't want to give him a contract with 2 years left, but as you reported, Cousins walks out the door. They're basically like, okay, KO, draft a quarterback. And I think KO was like, okay, cool. Do I get a contract extension? Yeah. So if there was, as was reported by Pro Football Talk, tension in the building, how much do you think that was an issue? And why do you think it took until after a 14-win season to get this done with?
Yeah, I think a couple things. We can argue about whether the Wilfs should have made an offer to Kevin O'Connell as he's about to start over at quarterback rather than basically put him in a prove it situation in the year that he's going to start over at quarterback, which he, by the way, knocked out of the park. And we can also point out that, and I'm sure O'Connell realized this in a calm, state of zen that like, if you go out and do that, you're going to make a lot more money than you would have if they had made you a market level offer for a coach who was 20-14 with one playoff game last year. And so, but the bottom line was like, he was displeased by that. And, then I think, and I don't know if the McDaniel extension in Miami necessarily added to that or not, but like, we saw that can happen. Like a guy can get hired and 2 years later, with a winning record and have an extension given and accepted. But that was the situation. And then like in the summer, Mark Wilf said, we're going to wait till after the season. And even though they were like romping through the year and, in the midst of a 9-game winning streak where they were pushing towards 14 wins, that didn't change anything about their timetable. And so I think that's really all it took for other teams around the league to smell blood in the water, whether there was actually blood in the water or not. No different than if a player is approaching the final year of his contract and there's no extension yet, you call and see, like, is there, are you interested in, are you keeping him? Or if not, we want in. And I think that's where things were stood on that last Sunday. And so, and Jay Glazer, like, accurately reported that there were teams who were ready to jump in on it if there was something to jump in on, and the Vikings made clear there was not. And then they backed that up by within days of the end of the season signing him to a contract. So I think there was definitely some displeasure, definitely some angst, enough that it inspired multiple teams around the league to be curious about it. But it's kind of an all's well that ends well situation. And so I don't think there's anything lingering. I don't think there's anything that is going to prevent a long-term relationship from continuing here. But it was, and I don't even want to say it was dicey, but it was just, there were some rough edges that need to be smoothed out, and they were.
A big contract makes things nice, though, right? Like, get that big contract. Forget about how it felt.
Yeah, to sit back. Whenever Jay McCarthy, year 3, year 4.
I'm getting $4 million more than I would have
right.
last summer. Hey, boys, thank you.
Yeah, I mean, two things could be true. Other teams probably were going to look around and say, hey, what's going on in Minnesota? Why haven't they locked him up?
Right.
And just human nature, though. If you made an organizational decision, which it was last year, to move on from Cousins, you're starting over. This is a page turner. You're going a whole other direction. But we're not going to assign the coach to a new contract in line with that. Drafting a quarterback, human nature would be like, what? No, wait a second, what? Aren't we on the same page here? So I can understand if O'Connell was like, did I do something wrong, or is there something more here? Right. I don't know about. But I also know, I'm guessing his paycheck's a little bit larger today than it would have been if he signed it last summer.
Right.
So
right.
As you said, it worked out well for him, and I'm guessing minimum 4 years. If you added the last year of his thing, I think at minimum it's a 4-year and possibly 5 years, and among the highest paid in the league, because he's earned it. You look at it. You look what this staff has going right now, and just what they've done. He's proven himself to, be a good coach and have a good staff. And I do think the staff will come back intact. I don't think Flores looks like the jobs are getting filled around. So I guess there's still a couple opening, but the reports about tension, I tend to believe some, those things don't just fall out of the sky. I mean, people hear stuff and, but
yeah, it's just a matter of word choice. Was it tension? Was it pleasure? Was it
discontent?
Angst,
bitterness.
Yeah. Angst is a good word. Angst, that's the word.
Go through your SAT list or your ACT list of vocabulary, and everybody can find the one that fits what they want to put out.
And am I correct in saying that the only time the Wilfs have done a contract extension for a coach in season was Childress in 2009? I seem to recall that came in season. And
that one came in season. I don't know. When did the Zimmer one came after year 2, right?
It came after the season, right? Yeah.
I don't think they've ever extended. I don't think they've ever extended a coach since Chile in season.
Which is not a terrible idea. Like, it's okay to say. I mean, players say this all the time. Like, let's not have that be going on in the middle of everything. And so it's okay. And deadline. It's good to create deadlines for deals anyway. So that's okay, I think.
Gentlemen, fantastic stuff. It's been a pleasure. Kevin Seifert, Chip Scoggins, two of the best in the business, and I'm very proud to say I worked with both. So we will talk to you soon. Purple Access.
Hey, boys.